Never see a bitch like me doing is arguing with one of you hoes. Cause you wanna know why? Bitch, I don't know how to argue. I'm gonna run out of shit to say.
Help! I'm being held hostage. Send police to Serenity Apartment Homes. Don't call, just send them. These 13 words, sent at 3:47 a.m. on February 25th, 2024, would be the last communication Mahogany Jackson ever made. The desperate text message, typed with trembling fingers, to her mother Gail Maddox, carried the weight of a young woman's final hope for survival. Within minutes of hitting send, 20-year-old Mahogany would be dead, executed with a single gunshot to the back of her head by people she considered friends. But to understand how a routine Saturday night in Birmingham, Alabama transformed into one of the most brutal crimes in the city's recent history, we need to step back 24 hours earlier. We need to meet the vibrant young mother whose life was about to be stolen in the most horrific way imaginable. Mahogany Jackson wasn't just another statistic waiting to happen. She was a daughter, a mother, a friend, a young woman navigating the complexities of early adulthood while raising her 3-year-old daughter in the city she called home. Her story begins not with violence, but with the ordinary rhythms of a life lived with love, responsibility, and hope for tomorrow. Mahogany Jackson embodied the strength and determination that defined so many young mothers in Birmingham. At 20 years old, she had already embraced the profound responsibility of raising her 3-year-old daughter, a role that shaped every decision she made and every dream she harbored for the future. Her days revolved around the beautiful chaos of motherhood, school pickups, bedtime stories, and the countless small moments that create the foundation of a child's world. The bond between Mahogany and her mother, Gail Maddox, ran deeper than typical mother-daughter relationships. Gail wasn't just a parent. She was Mahogany's confidant, her support system, and her anchor during life storms. Their connection was built on trust, open communication, and an understanding that family meant everything. When challenges arose, Mahogany knew she could count on her mother's wisdom and unwavering support. Friends and family described Mahogany as compassionate and resilient, someone who faced life's obstacles with grace and determination. She possessed the kind of warmth that drew people to her, making friends easily and maintaining relationships with genuine care. Her laughter was infectious, her spirit unbreakable, and her love for her daughter absolute. Living in Birmingham provided Mahogany with a sense of community and belonging. She knew the neighborhoods, the local spots, and the people who made up the fabric of her daily life. This familiarity created a sense of security. She felt safe in her environment, surrounded by people she trusted. Unfortunately, this very trust would become the weapon used against her on that fatal February night. February 24th, 2024 started like any other Saturday for Mahogany Jackson. The winter evening in Birmingham carried the typical chill of late February, with families settling into their weekend routines and young adults making plans for the night ahead. For Mahogany, it seemed like an opportunity to spend time with people she considered part of her social circle, individuals she had known and trusted. The Serenity Apartment Homes, located in Birmingham, would become the stage for unspeakable horror. But as Saturday evening approached, there was nothing to suggest the nightmare that was about to unfold. Mahogany had no reason to suspect that the people inviting her over harbored deadly intentions. She had no way of knowing that what appeared to be a casual social gathering was actually a carefully planned trap. As darkness fell over Birmingham that Saturday night, Mahogany Jackson prepared to leave her home, completely unaware that she was walking into the final hours of her life. The ordinary evening was about to become anything but ordinary. The cruelest betrayals often come from those we least expect. For Mahogany Jackson, the people who would become her tormentors weren't strangers lurking in dark alleys. They were individuals she knew, people who had shared conversations, laughter, and moments of apparent friendship. This familiarity made their transformation into predators all the more devastating and incomprehensible. Among the 8 people who would ultimately be charged in connection with her murder were Brandon Pope, Francis Harris, Jeremiah McDowell, Blair Green, Sinaya McCall, Taja Lewis, Gio Vaniclap, and Ariana Robinson. These weren't hardened criminals with extensive rap sheets. They were young people from her community, some barely out of their teens themselves. The fact that Mahogany knew several of them personally made her guard naturally lower, creating the perfect conditions for what was about to unfold. Trust is a precious commodity, especially for a young mother trying to navigate social relationships while protecting herself and her child. Mahogany had extended that trust to people who would exploit it in the most horrific way possible. The betrayal began not with violence, but with deception. Friendly invitations that masked deadly intentions, casual conversations that were actually reconnaissance, and smiles that concealed hearts filled with malice. The Serenity Apartment homes in Birmingham would become forever associated with one of the city's most heinous crimes. This residential complex, like many others throughout the area, housed families, young professionals, and students trying to build their lives in Alabama's largest city. The name Serenity itself carried an ironic weight, suggesting peace and tranquility in a place that would witness unimaginable violence. On that February night, one of these apartments became a carefully constructed prison. The location wasn't chosen randomly. It provided the privacy and isolation that the perpetrators needed to carry out their planned assault. Away from the watchful eyes of neighbors and passersby, the apartment offered the perfect cover for what they intended to do to Mahogany Jackson. The setup was methodical and calculated. The invitation to come over appeared innocent enough, just friends hanging out on a Saturday night. But behind the casual facade lay a trap that had been deliberately set. The apartment became a stage where trust would be shattered, where friendship would reveal itself as a mask for something far more dangerous. As Mahogany arrived at the complex that evening, she had no idea she was walking into a nightmare that had been planned in advance. The very people she trusted had transformed a place of supposed safety into a chamber of horrors. Have you ever trusted someone who completely betrayed that trust? Maybe it wasn't life or death, but that feeling of shock when someone you cared about showed their true colors? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes talking about these betrayals helps us recognize the warning signs. What began as a seemingly normal social gathering quickly transformed into a nightmare beyond comprehension. Once Mahogany was inside the apartment, the facade of friendship disappeared entirely. The people she had trusted revealed their true intentions as they turned on her with shocking brutality and coordination. The assault that followed was systematic and deliberate. Mahogany was stripped of her clothing and dignity, handcuffed to prevent any chance of escape, and subjected to a series of increasingly violent attacks.
Breaking news update, 7 of the 8 people charged in the killing and kidnapping of Mahogany Jackson were in a Jefferson County courtroom today. In February of 2024, Jackson was tortured, raped, and murdered. Now, several pre-trial motions were heard as prosecutors prepared to take the first cases to trial. ABC 3340's Gracie Johnson sat in on every hearing, and Gracie, share what happened.
Muriel, today's hearings focused mostly on legal motions for nearly all of the defendants in the capital murder case involving Mahogany Jackson. Now, a judge made it clear that she plans to move forward with the process, and we learned that the state plans to seek the death penalty in all of the 7 cases that were presented today. Now, Blair Green was ruled competent to stand trial though a second mental evaluation is underway due to his refusal of one portion of the mental evaluation prior. Now, defense attorneys for McCall sought to block graphic autopsy photos, and limited media contact was ordered. Both Ariana Robinson and Brandon Pope requested bond today, but Judge Davis denied both motions, citing capital murder charges. And prosecutors announced that they plan to try Francis Harris, Tasia Lewis, and Sanaya McCall first, in that order. And the judge aims to start at least 1 or 2 of these trials before the end of the year. Live in Jefferson County, Gracie Johnson, ABC 3340 News.
Her captors beat her mercilessly, spat on her, and forced her to perform degrading acts at gunpoint. Each act of violence seemed designed not just to harm her physically, but to break her spirit completely. Perhaps most disturbing of all, her tormentors documented their crimes. They recorded the assault on their phones, capturing every moment of Mahogany's suffering for reasons that defy human understanding. This decision to film their actions would later become crucial evidence, but in those horrific hours, It served only to add another layer of humiliation to an already unbearable situation. For several hours, Mahogany endured this torture while her captors showed no mercy, no hesitation, and no recognition of her humanity. The young mother who had entered that apartment as a friend was now fighting for her very survival. At 3:47 a.m. on February 25, 2024, Gail Maddox's phone buzzed with an incoming text message. What she read on her screen would haunt her forever. Help! I'm being held hostage. Send police to Serenity Apartment Homes. Don't call, just send them. The message was brief but contained crucial details that revealed Mahogany's desperation and her awareness of the gravity of her situation. She knew exactly where she was being held, providing her mother with the specific location needed for rescue. More importantly, her instruction not to call demonstrated her understanding that any phone conversation could alert her captors and potentially escalate the violence. The urgency in those 13 words was unmistakable. This wasn't a casual request for help or a misunderstanding. This was a young woman's final attempt to save her own life. Mahogany had somehow managed to access her phone during the assault, typing out this message while enduring unimaginable torture. The fact that she was able to send such a coherent and detailed plea while under extreme duress speaks to her incredible strength and presence of mind. Every word in that text message carried weight. Help conveyed the immediacy of her need. Hostage made clear this wasn't a voluntary situation. The specific address gave law enforcement exactly what they needed to find her. For any parent, receiving a message like this represents their absolute worst nightmare. Gail Maddox, who had shared such a close bond with her daughter, suddenly found herself thrust into every mother's most terrifying scenario. The woman who had been Mahogany's confidant, support system, and anchor was now the only person standing between her daughter and death. The panic that must have coursed through Gail's body is difficult to comprehend. In the middle of the night, jolted awake by a message that shattered her world, she had to process the unthinkable reality that her daughter was in mortal danger. The specific instruction not to call meant she couldn't even hear Mahogany's voice or offer words of comfort and reassurance. Gail immediately contacted law enforcement, following her daughter's precise instructions. She provided them with the exact location, Serenity Apartment Homes, and conveyed the urgency of the situation. Every second felt like an eternity as she waited for news, praying that help would arrive in time to save her daughter's life. The bond between mother and daughter that had been built over 20 years now became a lifeline. Mahogany had reached out to the one person she knew would move heaven and earth to help her. Unfortunately, even a mother's love couldn't overcome the evil that had already taken hold. Investigators believe that Mahogany's captors discovered she had sent the desperate message to her mother, and this discovery sealed her fate. Whether they saw her with the phone, noticed her typing, or became aware through some other means, the realization that law enforcement might be on the way triggered the final and most deadly phase of their attack. The knowledge that help was potentially coming should have been Mahogany's salvation, but instead it became her death sentence. Her captors understood that their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. If police arrived and found Mahogany alive, she would be able to identify each of them and testify about the horrific crimes they had committed against her. This moment marked the transition from assault and torture to premeditated murder. What had been a prolonged attack driven by cruelty now became a calculated decision to eliminate the only witness to their crimes. The text message that represented Mahogany's last hope for survival had inadvertently triggered the very violence that would end her life. Francis Harris, known by the street name Ace, made a decision that would forever brand him as a cold-blooded killer. With Mahogany's desperate plea for help now discovered, the group faced a choice that would determine whether they were guilty of assault or murder. Harris chose murder. The execution was carried out with chilling calculation. There was no moment of hesitation, no last-minute change of heart, no recognition of Mahogany's humanity. Harris positioned himself behind the 20-year-old mother and fired a single gunshot into the back of her head. The bullet ended not just Mahogany's life, but also destroyed the future of her 3-year-old daughter, who would now grow up without her mother. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of lost control. It was a deliberate execution designed to eliminate the only witness who could identify her attackers. The decision revealed the depths of depravity that Harris and his accomplices had reached. They had crossed the line from assault to murder, transforming themselves from criminals into killers. In that moment, Frances Harris didn't just take Mahogany's life. He shattered the lives of everyone who loved her. The young woman who had fought so hard to survive, who had managed to send that crucial message to her mother, was silenced forever by someone she had once considered a friend. After murdering Mahogany Jackson, her killers faced the grim task of disposing of her body. Their choice of location revealed both their familiarity with Birmingham's darker corners and their calculated attempt to delay discovery. They transported Mahogany's remains to a remote area known locally as Dead Man's Road, a name that carried ominous significance even before this tragedy. This location served as an illegal dumping site, a place where people discarded unwanted items, far from the watchful eyes of law enforcement and the general public. The killers believed this isolated spot would provide the perfect cover for their crime, allowing them time to establish alibis and destroy evidence before anyone found Mahogany's body. In a final act of callousness, they covered her remains with a mattress, treating her body like discarded trash rather than recognizing her as the beloved daughter, mother, and friend she had been. This deliberate concealment demonstrated their complete lack of remorse and their desperate hope that Mahogany would never be found. The choice to dump her body at this particular location wasn't random. It was a calculated decision made by people who understood the area well enough to know where bodies could remain hidden. Unfortunately for them, their knowledge of Birmingham's geography wouldn't be enough to keep their crime concealed forever. If this story is keeping you on edge, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting to the shocking part. The investigation revealed how these killers' own actions became the evidence that would bring them to justice. You won't want to miss what happens next. On February 26, 2024, just one day after Mahogany's murder, a passerby made the horrific discovery that would confirm her family's worst fears. While traveling along the remote stretch known as Dead Man's Road, this individual noticed something unusual beneath the discarded mattress and decided to investigate further. What they found beneath that makeshift cover was Mahogany Jackson's lifeless body, bringing a tragic end to the frantic search that had begun when Gail Maddox first contacted police about her daughter's desperate text message. The discovery transformed what had been a missing person case into a homicide investigation, launching law enforcement into immediate action. For Mahogany's family, the confirmation of their worst nightmare was devastating beyond words. The young mother who had reached out for help in her final moments was gone forever, leaving behind a 3-year-old daughter who would never again feel her mother's embrace. The discovery on Dead Man's Road marked not just the end of Mahogany's life, but the beginning of a quest for justice that would consume the months and years to follow. Birmingham Police Chief Scott Thurmond knew his department was facing one of the most brutal crimes in the city's recent history. The discovery of Mahogany Jackson's body on Dead Man's Road launched an investigation that would test every resource and skill his officers possessed. What they found would exceed even their most experienced detectives' expectations for human cruelty. The investigation moved with remarkable speed, thanks to a combination of professional police work and unprecedented community cooperation. Chief Thurmond later credited this collaboration between law enforcement and Birmingham residents as the key factor in the rapid identification and arrest of the suspects. Citizens who had information came forward willingly, understanding that justice for Mahogany required their participation. Within hours of discovering the body, investigators had identified multiple persons of interest. The digital age had left a trail of evidence that the killers never anticipated would be used against them. Phone records, social media activity, and location data began painting a clear picture of who was involved and what had transpired during those horrific hours at the Serenity apartment homes. Chief Thurmond's response to the case reflected both his professional commitment to justice and his personal outrage at the crime's brutality. He understood that this wasn't just another homicide. It was an attack on the very fabric of community trust and safety. The swift police response sent a clear message that such violence would not be tolerated in Birmingham, and that every available resource would be deployed to bring the perpetrators to justice. The investigation culminated in the arrest of 8 individuals, each of whom played a role in Mahogany Jackson's torture and murder. Brandon Pope, Francis Harris, Jeremiah McDowell, Blair Green, Senia McCall, Taja Lewis, Gio Vaniclap, and Ariana Robinson found themselves facing charges that would potentially cost them their lives or decades behind bars. What made these arrests particularly shocking was the age and background of the suspects. These weren't career criminals or hardened gang members. They were young people, some barely out of their teens, who had made the conscious decision to participate in unspeakable violence. Several of them had known Mahogany personally, making their betrayal even more incomprehensible to her family and the community. The relationships between the suspects and Mahogany varied, but the common thread was familiarity. She had trusted these individuals enough to be in their presence, never suspecting that they harbored such capacity for evil. This betrayal of trust made the crime particularly heinous in the eyes of both law enforcement and the public. Initially, 3 suspects, Pope, Harris, and McDowell, were charged with capital murder, kidnapping, and rape. The remaining 5 faced felony murder charges, though these would later be upgraded as the full extent of their involvement became clear. All 8 were held without bond, deemed too dangerous to be released back into the community. In a twist that would prove to be their ultimate downfall, Mahogany's killers had documented their own crimes. The decision to record the assault and torture on their phones created an overwhelming body of evidence that prosecutors would later describe as both crucial and disturbing beyond measure. These recordings captured every horrific detail of Mahogany's final hours. The videos showed the systematic nature of the assault, the deliberate cruelty inflicted upon her, and the complete lack of remorse displayed by her attackers. What the perpetrators had intended as trophies of their violence became the very evidence that would convict them. Defense attorneys would later acknowledge that the sheer volume of digital evidence made their job nearly impossible. The recordings left no room for doubt about what had occurred in that apartment, who was involved, or the level of brutality inflicted upon Mahogany Jackson. The killers had essentially created their own prosecution case. The existence of these videos also provided investigators with crucial timeline information, helping them reconstruct the sequence of events and understand each suspect's level of participation. Modern technology, which the killers had used to document their crimes, became the tool that ensured justice for Mahogany. Their arrogance in recording their actions had sealed their fate, just as surely as they had sealed hers. The legal proceedings that followed Mahogany Jackson's murder would prove to be as complex and emotionally draining as the crime itself was brutal. Jefferson County District Attorney Danny Carr faced the challenging task of prosecuting 8 defendants for one of Birmingham's most heinous crimes, with the state seeking the ultimate penalty for several of the accused. As the case progressed through the court system, charges were upgraded to reflect the full scope of each defendant's involvement. All 8 suspects eventually faced capital murder charges, with prosecutors arguing that the premeditated nature of the crime and its extreme brutality warranted consideration of the death penalty. The legal team emphasized that this wasn't a spontaneous act of violence, but a calculated assault that escalated to murder. District Attorney Carr understood the emotional toll this case was taking on Mahogany's family and repeatedly reminded them that justice operates as a marathon, not a sprint. The extensive digital evidence, while overwhelming in its clarity, required careful presentation and analysis. Pre-trial hearings stretched on as defense attorneys struggled with the mountain of evidence against their clients. The court proceedings became a test of the legal system's ability to handle such a complex case involving multiple defendants, extensive video evidence, and charges carrying the possibility of execution. Each hearing brought Mahogany's family closer to justice, but also forced them to relive the nightmare of her final hours. The brutality of Mahogany Jackson's murder sent shockwaves throughout Birmingham and the broader Alabama community. The crime struck at the heart of what people believed about safety, trust, and the bonds that hold communities together. The fact that a young mother had been tortured and killed by people she knew challenged everyone's assumptions about personal security. Vigils were organized at the Serenity apartment complex, where Mahogany had suffered her final hours. Community members gathered to light candles, offer prayers, and show solidarity with her grieving family. These gatherings became powerful symbols of collective mourning and determination that such violence would not be tolerated or forgotten. The public outcry extended far beyond Birmingham city limits. Social media platforms filled with expressions of outrage, sympathy for Mahogany's family, and demands for swift justice. The case became a rallying point for discussions about violence against women, community safety, and the responsibility of citizens to protect one another. Local leaders, religious figures, and community activists used Mahogany's story to highlight broader issues of violence prevention and the importance of building stronger, more vigilant neighborhoods. Her death became a catalyst for conversations about how communities can better protect their most vulnerable members and recognize warning signs before tragedies occur. As of 2025, the legal battle for justice in Mahogany Jackson's case continues. Pre-trial proceedings remain ongoing, with prosecutors methodically building their case for capital punishment against multiple defendants. The complexity of prosecuting 8 individuals simultaneously has extended the timeline, but District Attorney Carr's office remains committed to securing justice. Mahogany's family continues their fight for accountability, attending every hearing and maintaining pressure on the legal system to deliver the justice their daughter deserves. Their 3-year-old granddaughter, now growing up without her mother, serves as a constant reminder of what was stolen from their family and why this fight matters so deeply. Mahogany Jackson's tragic death offers crucial lessons that could help prevent similar tragedies in the future. The most important insight centers on community vigilance and the power of collective responsibility. Chief Thurman's emphasis on community cooperation during the investigation highlights how citizens and law enforcement must work together to identify and address potential threats before they escalate to violence. Emergency protocols also deserve serious examination. Mahogany's specific instructions to her mother, providing the exact location and warning not to call, demonstrate the importance of having clear communication strategies during crisis situations. Families should discuss emergency procedures, including how to quickly and effectively contact authorities when someone is in immediate danger. Recognizing danger signs within social circles requires heightened awareness. The fact that Mahogany knew several of her attackers underscores the need to trust instincts about people's behavior, even when they seem familiar or friendly. Warning signs might include sudden changes in behavior, discussions of violence, or attempts to isolate someone from their support network. Building stronger community networks where neighbors look out for each other can create additional layers of protection. When people feel connected to their communities and comfortable reporting suspicious activity, it becomes much harder for predators to operate undetected. Mahogany's story reminds us that safety is everyone's responsibility. The extensive digital evidence in Mahogany's case demonstrates both the power and importance of modern technology in criminal investigations. The killer's decision to record their crimes provided prosecutors with irrefutable evidence of their guilt, showing how technology can serve justice even when used for evil purposes. Law enforcement agencies must continue investing in cyber forensics capabilities and training officers to handle digital evidence effectively. Phone records, social media activity, location data, and video evidence have become crucial tools in modern policing. The rapid resolution of Mahogany's case was possible largely because investigators could quickly analyze digital footprints left by the perpetrators. If Mahogany Jackson's story has moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and share this video with others. By spreading awareness of her story, we honor her memory and potentially help protect someone else from experiencing similar violence. Your engagement helps ensure that stories like Mahogany's reach the people who need to hear them most. Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on how we can better protect young mothers and vulnerable community members. Your insights and experiences matter, and together we can build stronger, safer communities where tragedies like this become impossible. Remember Mahogany Jackson not just as a victim, but as a loving mother, devoted daughter, and trusted friend whose life had value and meaning. Her 3-year-old daughter deserves to grow up in a world where such violence is unthinkable. By learning from this nightmare and taking action to protect others, we can help ensure that Mahogany's death was not in vain.